Greetings, viewers, and welcome to today's info sharing snippet. We'll be covering the various inventory costing methods within Sage Trend Evolution. Within Sage Trend Evolution, we have three available costing methods. These are weighted average, latest cost, and manual cost. In today's session, we'll be taking you through the various options that can be implemented for your stock items. Firstly, if we go to our inventory maintenance transaction types, let's just go back one, let us go through to our defaults first. Inventory defaults, shall I say. And we've got a price costing tab. And there we can specify a default costing method for either weighted average, being either weighted average, latest cost, or manual cost. So when creating new stock items, the costing method will default to the method specified under our defaults. Next, if we then go to our inventory maintenance, and we're going to go create some stock items with their different costing methods. So under my inventory items, I'm going to go create a new item, and this time we're going to create the item as a manual costing item. So under the pricing tab, I'm going to mark this as a manual cost item, and I'm going to insert a cost for the item. Cost of 12, and complete that process. I'm then going to go to inventory transactions, and then going to go and bring in some stock of this item. So goods received voucher. And remember, the cost is now set to 12. So I'm going to go and specify my supplier, pick up the stock item, and I'm going to bring in 10 units. And as you can see at this point, the price or the cost price displayed there is a manual cost that I've entered when creating the item. So in this particular example, I'm going to say that the price has now increased, for example, to say 15, and I'll bring in 10 units of that item and complete the transaction. I'm then going to revert back to my inventory items. And let's just go and edit the item that was created. If I go to my pricing tab, you'll see that the last GOV cost was 15. However, the manual cost has remained at 12. The reason being is because the manual cost item, in order for us to change the cost, we need to do a manual adjustment. So I'm just going to go back to inventory transactions, and I'm going to go do another GRV. And bring in 5 units. And this time, as you can see, the price is still displaying as 12. That was our manual cost. And I'm now going to make this, for example, say 20. So initially we had the 10 items coming at a cost of 15, and now 5 additional units at a cost of 20. Process the invoice and complete the transaction. I then revert back to my stock item, and we go and check on the pricing tab. We see that the manual cost has remained at 12, although we do have the cost of the GOV displaying at this particular point, which is the cost of 20. Right, so as you can see, that with manual cost, even though the cost of the item has changed when the goods are being purchased, the manual cost will remain in 12 until we go and change it. So I'm going to say okay to that process, and then if need be, I can then go do a cost adjustment on the manual item. And that I can simply do by going to my inventory, transactions. I can do a adjustment, a stock adjustment, specify the item. Specify to adjust the unit cost. And we have the 12 Rand displaying as a current manual cost. And I'm then going to adjust that to this point to, for example, to say 16. Process the transaction, close. And if I now go back to my inventory items, edit the item, pricing, you see that the manual cost has now been updated to 16, and the last year cost is still displaying as 20. So, and we then have our cost displaying as 16, which is now the new manual cost. We take it a step further and we just go and inquire on the item. So I'm going to go to my inquiries. And you'll see that we've got the initial goods receipt voucher being 10 units at 15, giving us a 150 total value. We then have 5 units at 20, giving us a total value of 100. And then due to the fact we made adjustment on the manual cost, we then had a value being of 60, which was in fact our cost update. So if need be, we would need to go to change the cost of the manual item or manual costing item. You'd need to process a cost adjustment, which would then update the cost of the item on the item itself. If we then go look at our valuation report for this item, and I'm going to view the report as at today's date. And preview. We then have the item being displayed together with the unit cost of 16, quantity on hand, and that's going to give us the total value of the items at the particular point in time. So once again, we've got the updated cost, quantity on hand, and the full value of the items. Right, so that is our manual cost setup. The next option would be to go set up our latest cost. So I'm going to go create an inventory item now and mark that as a latest cost item. And that item I'm going to mark as a latest cost item. And I'm going to say OK. And we're then going to go to our transactions and process a GRV to bring in some units of that item. Okay, we've got our details there. Bring in 10 units. The cost of, say, for example, then got our details there. I'll complete the transaction, insert and process the supply invoice. Right, if I then go back to my inventory items, then we'll go check details of the costing at this point. Pricing. So as you can see, the latest or the cost of the item is now set to 24, and we specify our last GRV cost there. Right, let's just go back and process another transaction. in 5 units. This time we're going to make the price 25. And go back to our inventory items now. See that we've now got the last GRV cost being 25, and the system has now specified that the latest unit cost is now 25, which was in fact our last GRV cost. If we then go and look at our reports, our valuation report, and preview, we now have the cost of 25, the quantity on hand, and the total value of those units at this point in time. And then once again, if need be, we could always just go and, if necessary, go process an inventory adjustment to go adjust the unit cost on hand to update it. But based on the concept of latest cost is that the system will go and see what was the last cost of the item that was purchased and then update those details in actual fact for the cost of the item. Right, we then have our third option, which is weighted average. And let's just go through to our inventory items. I'm going to go create a new stock item. Just go change that. Let's go to item. And I'm going to make that item a weighted average. So I'm going to not insert a cost at this time and back to processing and GRV. And insert those details there. In units, let's just make it, for example, at 9. And process the transaction. But at this point, I'm going to go and check on the pricing of the item. So pricing tells us that the cost currently is 9, which was the cost at which the items were received. And I currently have 10 units on hand. Now, with weighted average is the cost is calculated each time there's a change in the cost of the item. So I'm now going to go back to my goods received voucher, process another GRV to bring in more stock of the item. Five units, this time is going to be at 12. Process. And close. Right, so initially we had 10 units at 9, and then an additional 5 units at 12. Let's just go see exactly what has happened on the costing of the item. Our pricing, you'll see we now have an average unit cost of 12 rand. Okay, so last year we cost of 12, and the cost of the item is now set to 10. Let's see exactly how that process or that new cost has been calculated. So let's just take a note, and we can say initially there was 10 units at 90, which gave us 10 units at 9. Let's just adjust that, which gave us 90. And then with additional 5 units, at 12, and it would have given us 60. Right, so taking the total cost of the value, which would be 90 plus our 60, that's going to give us 150. And as you can see there, is we now have 10 units plus the 5, so therefore we've got 15 units in stock. So it's a case of 150 divided by 15, and that's going to give us current cost of 10. And there we go. That's how the system would calculate the new average cost. So based on average cost, every time there's a movement of the item, the cost changes. The system is then going to have to is going to perform a recalculation to determine the true cost of the item based on the value of the goods and the quantity available. And we'll just go and save that. And we can just always go revert back to the note to see exactly how those goods would calculate. And we then have details of the average unit cost available. If I then revert back to my reports for this particular item, and I'm going to go to my evaluation, and I'm going to preview the valuations point in time. We've then got our cost of 10, our quantity of 15, giving us a total value of 150. So with weighted average, a new cost is going to be calculated each time there's a movement of the item and the cost is different. You may need to at some point or decide to change the costing method on certain of your stock items. This process can be achieved under inventory maintenance. We then have a global item change option. And if I use that feature, as you can see, I can specify my range of items. For example, and then simply go specify to update the costing method, and then specify which particular costing method I want to change from one to the other. Also notice that once the costing method is changed, there is going to be some form of adjustment process on the item itself. So just be aware of that. And once again, at this point, I can specify which costing method I want to change a specific item or a range of items to. So let's just do a quick recap. If I go to my inventory items, adding a new item, under my pricing, I can specify the costing method, weighted average, latest cost, or manual cost. Manual cost means that I'm going to specify a specific cost for the item when the item is being created, and that cost remain the same irrespective of if the goods are put at different cost prices. In order to change the cost of the item or manual cost item, I would then need to go process an inventory stock adjustment and adjust the unit cost on hand. The latest cost, as the name implies, is going to update the cost of the item with the latest cost, which means the most recent cost of when the item was purchased. And then weighted average is just going to calculate the cost for me based on average each time the change in the cost when the goods are purchased. And the flexibility here is that you are able to have one database consisting of multiple stock items, and those individual stock items can all have different costing methods. I do hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you so much for watching. It's over and out from me, and goodbye.